so to maintain those. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about the design? There's that great sequence where she's facing down Kylo's TIE fighter in the desert when all the music falls away and we hear just the scream of that approaching ship.
Well, that was obviously a moment that we could really take advantage of with sound. Because a lot of times there's music, dialogue, there's a lot going on. But JJ gave us the opportunity to really take this moment where it's very silent and this face-off between our two main characters and build it into something that's incredibly intense. So, you know, we started off at a point that it was good. Like we played it for JJ's, it's good, but it feels like we're just starting. So then, you know, Dave, we would talk about it, go back and forth, add a couple more elements, played it again for JJ. What if we had just one more thing that kind of got louder here, and then how to deal with the point at which she jumps up in the air? How do you deal with that? Do you make it big and loud, or do you make it silent, or somewhere in between? And so, I think starting in the desert with Rey, just with wind, her footsteps and wind, hearing Kylo's ship from very distant, just almost sounds like wind, and then it builds into this crescendo of the Kylo ship coming full speed, and then into almost silence, and her doing the flip, which is an incredible feat. The visuals of that are incredible. And then taking what we did is we took a piece of the sound of Kylo's ship and reverbed it out incredibly, and then kind of lowered that, and the whole thing is just, it feels so visceral and exciting at that moment in the film, and then we get to see Kylo's ship get destroyed as well, which they go through a couple ships, Kylo does.
For those who don't know, do you want to tell them what the TIE fighter sound is?
So yeah, so the TIE fighter sound, the old Ben Burt recipe is it's an elephant scream and a race car on wet pavement. So for a lot of the TIE fighters in the movie, not a lot, so for some of the TIE fighters in the movie, we made our own TIEs, and for that scene in particular, it's mostly new TIE sounds. It's new TIE screams. It's the new engine sounds. We wanted it to be something totally new and totally crazy, something you've never heard before. So that's kind of where we went. And as much as we were adding things on Kylo's side of it to make it bigger, we were subtracting elements on Rey's side for contrast. So that's kind of an important side to that too. Is that whole contrast of minimalist on her side.
And one of the things that the person obviously we can't say enough about is John Williams, who is obviously just priceless and such a master. And
You can applaud for John.
John Williams. Oh, sorry. John Williams. And John, like, he'll write, he'll score a whole scene, and you'll say, I'm thinking, maybe, he'll say, oh, baby, I'll just write something. And then he writes this thing, you can't believe how amazing it is, and that anyone would give their right arm to be able to do. And he just does it. And so for that sequence, there was music for the whole thing. And pulling out any piece of John's music is always, you feel like you're playing with fire. It's like, why would I ever? And yet, to your point, to try and find a way to make the music, when it's there, have the greatest impact and where to pull back. So it was an interesting, that scene especially, was an interesting exploration. So, when that one moment you just mentioned where the TIE fighter goes right past camera, and then it cuts that wide, and you see this little dot going around the mountain in the distance. It's like, I think in that moment, the fact that there isn't music right there just lets it really feel, you get the distance in a way, and I just think you guys did an extraordinary job with it.
Thanks.
So I think that in the conversation around this film as it opens, and some of the criticism and some of the discourse between the fans, there's a sense of conflict between this movie and The Last Jedi. And how would you react to that? What do you say to people who are?
Thanks, everyone. That was really fun. I will say it would be a much more interesting answer if there were conflict. The truth is that I was, as I mentioned earlier, getting 7 up and running, nothing but grateful that a director and writer I admire as much as Ryan was coming in to do that. Not expecting to come back to this. It was just fun to watch what was happening and get to respond to it. When I was called to come onto this movie, though of course I wish we'd had that time, that we didn't, and was working with Chris, we had conversations with Ryan in the beginning. He, you know, it's been nothing but collaborative, and in a way, the perspective that, at least personally, I got stepping away from it and seeing what Ryan did, strangely gave us opportunities that would never have been there, because of course he made choices that no one else would have made, you know, just as we all do, and what any of us in this room do. So in a way, it felt kind of like a gift, and though of course there were challenges in every direction, some logistical, some narrative, some, you know, everything. It was, you know, it was actually weirdly more helpful than not having that other energy. There was a sort of, it felt like there's kind of an alchemy because of the things that he did. And one other thing I'll say is I think that people who say, oh, you know, that this film is kind of like flipping off The Last Jedi, and like when Luke says the thing he does about the lightsaber, if the scene in The Last Jedi where Luke tosses the saber over his shoulder were immediately followed by Luke saying, you know, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect, I think it was insane. But one of the many brilliant things that Ryan did in Last Jedi is give Luke an arc. He learned something. He got somewhere. So at the end of that film, he recommitted to the thing that at the very beginning of the film he was rejecting. And so the idea that even Luke Skywalker can learn something. I think for a kid to hear Luke Skywalker say, I was wrong, I think is a beautiful thing. And I think it's something we could all probably do with a little bit more.